Hello, and thank you for joining us for this segment of our training series, Fire Restrictions and Burn Bans. What we're going to cover today is who has the authority to put those in place and what are the laws and rules that govern fire restrictions in the state of New Hampshire in regards to outdoor burning. So, requiring a fire permit in New Hampshire, we do this mainly to give the fire service that contact with the public so that we can have outdoor burning in New Hampshire, but it's done as safely as possible and doesn't lead to a wildfire, doesn't lead to material being burned, which can uh, emit chemicals and harmful aerosols, and to mainly just talk to people about safe outdoor burning and make sure they're doing it when the weather conditions are favorable for burning. Uh, Being consistent statewide is really important for us so that the public has a better understanding of the laws and rules and they're not confused if they go to one town and the rules are different from another town. So we really want this statewide consistent message because that's going to lead to better compliance for the laws and rules. RSA 227 L17 paragraph 2 is the state statute where the requirement for a permit to do any outdoor burning is made. So anybody doing any outdoor burning in the state of New Hampshire is required to obtain a permit. They can do that through their local Forest Fire Warden, or they can do it by logging on to nhfirepermit.com. Either way works to get your permit. One thing to note is that when there is snow cover, which we define as a continuous 100-foot radius of snow around the fire location. So when you have that 100-foot radius of snow, then no fire permit is required. So you don't have to obtain that fire permit and restrictions wouldn't apply in that case. RES 5601.04 defines the parameters which must be met in order for a permit to be issued. Once all of these numbered parameters are met, then the warden or the wardens or the authorized issuing agent shall issue that permit. So number one here, the permittee has to be the landowner or has to have the landowner's written permission. The permittee has to meet the required age limit. So anyone acquiring a permit in the state of New Hampshire has to be 18 years or older. They have to have the fire located in an area that meets the setback from structures. So a category 1 small campfire has to be a minimum of 25 feet from structures, and a category 2 or 3 fire need to be 50 feet from structures. The material to be burned has to be clean, untreated wood or brush, less than 5 inches in diameter, and it has to meet all of the applicable air resource regulations. And that's put into place, one, so that we're not putting pollutants into the air, but also the size limit is there so that fires are more controllable and easier to put out and aren't going to be left burning for days on end with large debris that would just smolder. Continuing with that, the weather conditions have to be favorable. So this is where we talk about that contact with the permittee to make sure that we're not running fires, that we're in drought conditions and have fires starting because of high winds or uh, multiple conditions which could lead to unfavorable weather. The person having the fire has to have adequate suppression equipment to control the fire. So if they're going to have their campfire, they have to have access to water, maybe a shovel, just all the items needed to put that campfire out when they're done. Um, the burning can only be conducted during specified time frames. So a category 1 fire, that's your small campfire, that can be burned any time of the day. Category 2, which is a larger campfire, and then category 3, which is a brush pile. Those can only be burned after 5 p.m. and have to be out before 9 a.m. the next day. So you can burn those at night. And the last part of it is the permittee can't have more than two open burning violations within the past 7 years. Any restrictions put into place on open burning only apply to open burning as it's defined in rule, which is the burning of any material wherein products of combustion are emitted directly into the ambient air without passing through a stack or a chimney. The use of portable fireplaces are considered open burning. So when we put restrictions in place for open burning, this definition captures exactly what devices or what type of burning are restricted under our authority. So who can actually restrict burning? The governor, and we have done this on occasion where the governor has passed a proclamation prohibiting the burning in woodlands, whether it be on public land or broadly across all lands. And that's done when we reach a period of drought or excessive dryness, and it really is an extraordinary precaution that we put into place during these times of very serious drought or conditions where we're starting to run fires that are burning deep in remote locations, and just that real volatile situation due to the conditions. When the governor puts a proclamation in place, that's when we start to take extra steps. We get these signs out to our local forest fire wardens, as well as posting public areas to make sure that it's widely broadcast that there is a fire prohibition in place due to the extreme fire conditions. Again, this is very rarely done in the past 20 years. We've only done it twice, one of which was last year when we got into extreme drought conditions, but it is reserved for those times when we are concerned about widespread, difficult fires starting. The director of the Division of Forests and Lands also has the ability to suspend permit issuance. This is done through Rule 5601.09. And this can be done again when we're in those periods of uh, high fire activity and high fire danger. The thing to note here is that the director's ability to do this is restricted to class 4, very high, and 5, extreme fire danger days. So when we're in high fire danger for a short period of time, then the director currently does not have that authority to restrict burning. So again, that's not going to be done on a statewide level until we start to climb into very high or extreme fire danger. So the local forest fire warden, this is where most of the time you're going to see restrictions put into place. And again, under going back to RES 5601.04, where we talk about when shall a category 1, 2, or 3 permit be issued. One of the reasons the warden can deny or shut down permits is when weather conditions are unfavorable and they're concerned about that spread or escape of the fire. So going a little further with this, this is going to be where the warden hangs their hat most of the time and says, we have Unfavorable weather. I'm concerned that if we have a fire today where we're predicted high winds and we're afraid that fire is going to spread. So usually this is when we're getting up into the class 3 or high fire danger, and then again up into very high and extreme as well. That's when you're going to see that local control, the Forest Fire Warden in their community knows what their conditions are in their town, so that's when they're going to take those conditions and the predicted weather and the fire danger for the day, and they're going to say, today we are not issuing permits. So unfavorable weather conditions, again, they vary throughout the state. We may have a class 1 or low fire danger down on the seacoast, but over in Cheshire County, it might be high fire danger. Um, when we put out the fire danger, what we're representing is the near worst case conditions for exposed locations for the normal burning period of the day. So when we say class 3 high fire danger for today, we're looking at those open areas in on south facing slopes maybe, and we're looking at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the burning's going to be at its highest potential for getting out of control. So that's just a little background on how we do the fire danger and the predictions. Class 3 fire danger, that's when fires really, where we're starting to get concerned about fire spread. Um, Does that mean every fire in every corner of the state needs to be restricted? Not necessarily. Again, we're going to go back to that local knowledge and experience of the Forest Fire Warden. The state normally is not going to put out any restrictions on class 3 days. That's really going to stay with the local control. Um, and what the wardens need to be looking for when they are considering prohibiting burning that day, they need to look at what the wind speeds are going to be, what the relative humidity and the temperatures are going to be, and when was the last time we had rain. If we're a week without rain in the middle of April, things haven't greened up, we're going to have hot temperatures, we have low relative humidity, then and we're expecting higher winds mid-afternoon, then that's going to be a time where the warden's going to consider shutting off permits. With that being said, the warden does not have the authority to prohibit burning for an entire season. So the example here, under the authority of the Director of Forests and Lands, who is where the wardens get their authority, they could not prohibit burning for the entire month of April just because it's spring and that's typically a drier time of year. The current weather conditions really need to be thought about and taken into consideration, and they have to create that unfavorable burning condition. So if it's raining today in April, um, no wind or anything, and we're getting a good soaking rain, then most likely it's going to be hard to say that permits need to be shut down for that day. If a town wants to put local restrictions into place that are more restrictive than the state law, then they need to do that by passing a local ordinance. They're not changing state law, they're creating a local rule which they are putting into place, and it can't be less restrictive than state law. It has to be more restrictive, otherwise, state law takes precedence. The ordinance has to be approved, voted on, and approved by the laws governing towns and cities. It's very specific on how ordinances can be passed. Um, if the ordinance requires a permit when state law doesn't require permits, for example, if a town passes an ordinance that says permits are required year round, even when there's snow cover. Well, then when there's snow cover, they would need to use a local permit that they develop. They wouldn't be able to use the state's permit for that purpose because the state laws and rules would not apply. It would fall solely on the uh, ordinance which was passed. Again, it has to be equally as stringent as provided by state laws, so it can't specify something that would violate state law. And the town needs to be aware that local ordinances cannot be enforced by the forest rangers or the forest fire wardens or deputy wardens with the authority that they have through the director of the Division of Forests and Lands. If they are the fire chief as well, then that authority would allow them to enforce the town ordinance, but they would not be doing that as a forest fire warden because the state cannot enforce local ordinances. That falls back onto the municipality which votes the ordinance in place. Burn times for fires cannot be restricted locally without an ordinance, again, voted on by the residents of that community. Um, Under rule, it's defined that a Category 1 fire can be kindled any time of the day, whether raining or not. That's a statewide rule, and it's in place, and it can't be changed unless there's that local ordinance changing it. Category 2 and 3 fires cannot be started before 5 p.m. and have to be out by 9 a.m. Those are solid rules statewide, and that's what needs to be in place without a local ordinance. But again, uh, that's just dealing with the time that the fires are permissible. Restricting the burn type, again, without a local ordinance, you can't restrict the burn types within a community. So Category 1 permits, you can't have a restriction locally that says nobody can have a campfire. That's allowed statewide. There's a permitting process for that. The only way that could be changed is if there was a local ordinance. However, with that being said, there are times when the fire danger is such that the warden may restrict certain types of fires because of the weather conditions. Uh, what you'll see sometimes is we'll start to get into some high fire danger or some drier conditions, and the warden will still allow campfires or those small fires, campfires, Category 1 fires that are in a fire resistive ring. They're no greater than 2 feet in diameter. So those fires aren't going to escape necessarily as quick as a large bonfire or a Category 3 fire that has a big brush pile and no fire resistive ring around it. Those fires have a higher potential of escaping than that small campfire. So a warden may, on a given day, because of the weather conditions, say we're still going to allow small backyard campfires, but if anyone comes in looking for a brush pile permit, they're not going to get it today because of the weather conditions. Any restrictions put into place statewide do not apply to federal lands. Federal agencies have their own policies and their own rules. Sometimes they do follow what the state does, but it's not required by law. So just keep that in mind when restrictions are in place that federal agencies can still burn. It has been past practice that we all work together as fire management agencies. So, for example, when the state puts in a burn ban, we're working with the White Mountain National Forest hand in hand, and they're going to be looking at what we're doing and oftentimes putting their restrictions in place at the same time. So, again, we have that consistent messaging across the state and people aren't confused. So we can't restrict what's happening on federal lands, but we are partners in fire prevention. So we're always talking with each other and working to keep that consistent message. So again, just reviewing the take-home message that we want to make sure people understand. We require fire permits, so it gives the fire service that opportunity to educate the public about safe outdoor burning uh, for the prevention of burning non-permissible material and to make sure that we are not burning when there's unfavorable weather conditions. And we want to make sure that this is consistent statewide so that people don't get confused. They understand what the laws and rules are, and they're not confused when they go from one town to another because we have that consistent messaging. If you need any information, we do have our website and our mailing address is here as well. 172 Pembroke Road in Concord, New Hampshire. You can also call our main headquarters at 603-271-2214. And a great way to keep track of the daily fire danger is to follow us on Twitter. Every day during the fire season, we tweet out the fire danger and any other important messages about fire activity statewide. Thank you.